had such an impact on me that that was the first piece of art that I acquired. And I can sit before that painting, have a cup of tea, and just enjoy a world that I actually grew up in. And that means a lot to me to be able to have that kind of world in my house.
Tom, that I know, is definitely a romantic. I wish that everyone had the ability to see around them with Tom's eyes, with his insight. Um, Everything is just a little better with him. The skies are just a little bit more colorful. The detail that he remembers, that he sees, that he puts in, it draws you to a higher state. Um, Tom always has put things in the best possible light he could.
The paintings are a landscape of language. They are a language all their own. I mean, for example, you look at a painting like Garden of Prayer or Springgate, and Springgate. Well, it's a roadway going up into the distance, but it's really not a road. It's a message about an invitation, about the gate that lies open before us, and about the path of life, so to speak, the journey of life as we go around corners and find the unexpected. Or a painting like Bridge of Faith is to me very symbolic of facing obstacles in our life, that stream that comes down, and you need to cross those obstacles, and your faith is what gets you through. Faith is a crumbling bridge. I don't portray it as a perfect structure. It's often crumbling and weak, but it gets us over that obstacle, our faith in God. I see the paintings as a language of kind of spiritual realities, but portrayed in everyday forms.
From an artist's standpoint, his softness was his strength. It wasn't a weak point whatsoever. The huge man that could walk down and pick up a small child and spend a minute with him instead of trying to be macho or not having taken the time to do things that you really need to do. And like I say, as a man in my age, I watched him and I needed that. It was something I needed to express to people. So his strength was his softness.
I always admired him so much because every time he produced a piece of art of any kind, his heart was out there on his shirt sleeve, and it was up to the general public to either give him the acclaim or to accept it.
A lady came in a wheelchair and she rolled up and looked at one of Thomas's originals, and I knelt down next to her, and it was just so fabulous that the lady could come alive. She was looking at Thomas's work, and I learned then that Thomas wasn't selling himself. He was really selling something that people saw. Not everybody saw it. Some people saw it as something to put on the wall, but there was a group of people who see what Thomas really is about. And, yeah, it was really something to see that.
There's one of the great secrets in living that I think my paintings may suggest to people, and that is that no matter how dark the storm is, no matter how deep the clouds, how much the winds blow and the rain seems to pummel your life, the storm clouds will clear and the darkness will pass and a new day will dawn. And I think when I paint a world of tranquility with light that breaks forth, it is a reminder to people of that life truth. Now, we all have difficulties in our life, and we all are less than perfect individuals. Lord knows I look at my own failings sometimes and stand in wonder that God could even choose to use me. And yet, as I think of God's divine hand in each of our lives, I am determined to remind people God chooses to bless us.
Tom's vision has been to involve the collector, to bring the collector into a place where the collector can find peace and happiness and really, escape. We call it the 3-second vacation. You could be having a terrible day. Who knows what could be going on at home or at the office, but by looking into one of Tom's worlds, you can really walk into that place and be a part of it and have it be your own world.
Tom has had probably a million compliments in his career But I have heard him say many times that the greatest compliment that you can pay him is that you would like to step into his picture.
You want the average man to be able to appreciate art the same as the rich man. Not the rich man buying up, well, this is a Van Gogh, and this is a Picasso, and this is a blah, 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 you know. Tom decided his mission was to do a painting and multiply it so it could be spread out amongst the average person.
I think when people look at the paintings, they say to themselves, I feel comfortable in this world this artist has painted. And they want to step into that world. They want to step into that cottage. And in fact, it's been kind of interesting. The comment I get almost universally at every art show is, I wish I could live there. And to which I reply, I wish I could too. That's why I painted it. It's the kind of place I would love to live, would love to visit. And I don't really paint the world the way it looks. I paint the world the way we all kind of daydream it would be. I get rid of all the ugly edges and the hard, cold reality and try to paint a world full of light and life.
He put you into his landscapes. I mean, you just forgot where you were to be there in that hut or the trail or walking through that timber.
It amazes me that he can do that with so many of his canvases. And they're in different ways, but they do draw you into it, and you could be a part of that scene.
People want to be literally in the paintings. They feel the warmth and the peacefulness, you know, the serenity of it. I mean, that I think was what he's done. He's created an image in a world that people want to be in. And it revolves around the home and all of that.
You know, he paints these houses, in my opinion. When he's painting them, he sees a family inside of them. And it's all filled. You can tell the smoke is coming out of the chimney, the lights are on. And for Tom, this is a family. This is a family, a group that stays together. And I think that's all part of the simpler times that most of us yearn for.
I think the worlds I paint are idealized, and all of us in our heart probably have a need to daydream, to dream about a world a little more perfect. And anyone who thinks that I paint this kind of perfect world because that's the world I live every day, you have to realize we all live in the real world. We all face pain, we all face challenges, and yet hopefully, by God's grace, we can see beyond those.
His personal faith is a driving force for everything that he does. His belief system. He believes that he can have a major impact on America. He believes in this country. And so everything that he paints has to do with that belief. And so he's not looking at his painting as merely a means of a business venture, but he's looking at his paintings as creating worlds that people can enter into. And when the people enter into those worlds, they find hope, they find peace, they find joy. And that's how I discovered much of Tom's work, was entering into one of those worlds myself.
You know, in art school, I was told so many times, you know, your art is all about you. You know, doesn't matter if someone likes it, doesn't matter if they understand it, if they appreciate it. You know, your art's about you. You got to do it for your own enjoyment, your own self-expression. And something about that didn't sit well with me. I began to realize my art's not about me. It's about you. It's about that other person. It's about letting something within you pour out in love to other people.
Like a sky full of stars. There's a lot of stars, and they all shine. But if you look up, you're going to find a few that shine brighter. Well, that was Tom Kincaid. He was one of those stars. His drawings were superb, but everyone else drew well because it's a very competitive college, and we draw people from all over the world there. And he could draw well, but he had one extreme quality. He knew what to draw. It was not just that he knew how to draw, he didn't have to be told. And it seemed that every time you asked Tom Kincaid for a drawing, he supplied two. At least two. So he was filled with good ideas.
It was a time for all of us of lots of work and very little money. And in seeing Tom go from being an art student into seeing him actually get started as a painter, I saw that there were two things that really put him over. One of them was the ability to work long and hard and just stick with it. And the other was a willingness to get out and promote himself. He and Jim turned out virtually all of the actual production backgrounds for the movie Fire and Ice. It was a barbarian adventure film. They'll tell you now that the stuff isn't so good, but really, especially considering how much work they did and their age, stuff is pretty good. It was an amazing amount of work. It was over 1,000 paintings.
He was making a good income with the working in the movies, and I was working as a nurse, so we had those finances. And Tom felt that it was time for him to step out and do his own work. And there wasn't a immediate success there. And there were months that there weren't finances, and it never slowed Tom down.
He was sent to me by a friend named Doug Jones in La Jolla, who had a small art gallery. Called me and said, I think this is an artist that has great potential. We certainly can't hold him, so I'm sending him up to you to see what you think. And I said, well, fine, because we got a lot of calls like that, and maybe 1 out of 100 works out. But Tom and Annette came in carrying a few paintings and photographs of his work, and we could see immediately that he had the potential to be what I thought was one of the great big-time landscape painters, which is, as I told him at the time, I think he could be a cross between Sidney Lawrence and Thomas Moran. He had that potential, and that's speaking. Those guys were tans.
So here's a guy, who sees an unknown artist and already is being able to say, hey, this is somebody that is going to go on to really big things. And you know what? In that business, you can't afford to say that about everybody.
I was really impressed by, particularly when Tom started working for galleries and working up stuff for his later one-man shows, that he really worked hard and worked long hours.
He was a competent artist with an open mind. So many of them are on such an ego trip that you can't discuss anything. But that wasn't the problem with. And when we first look at those paintings, they stopped you. And I had a lot of paintings. They have the presence of a great painting, and I almost didn't believe what I was saying because he was so young, 24 years old.
He continued to just press forward with that vision, painting the paintings, sending the paintings out, and waiting and praying that something would happen. And eventually things began to open up.
We sold the paintings that he brought to us, and the next batch he brought were maybe 3 or 4 other paintings, but they'd improved tremendously just in the few suggestions we made. He knew what we were talking about and had the talent to carry it through. I admired Tom's landscapes, the mountain scenes that he'd done for us, mainly California Sierra scenes. And I said, Tom is one of the great painters, landscape painters of North America, was Sidney Lawrence, who painted the Alaska painter. I said, I think you ought to go to Alaska and get a feel of that wilderness. Sierra Nevadas are one thing, British Columbia is another, but when you're in the wilderness in Alaska, it's just a different feeling. But I've got a friend, I'll send you up to Jim Harrower and spend some time with him on his lodge out in the Stony River, and 150, 200 miles from Anchorage, but right in the Alaska range. Wonderful peaks on either side of this roaring river. And he agreed to do that.
This was a phenomenal experience for him. And he came back with such a rich wealth of ideas for paintings through that experience. And I think this is something that Tom's done his whole life, of adventuring and painting. It started as a kid. He'd hike and sketch and course, the trip that he and Jim Gurney took, where they went across country and painted and sketched across the United States. But this type of fueling of his art through experience has been a big part of his art.
I think Tom, more than a lot of artists, realized very early on that to be successful as an artist, your work has to sell. It doesn't matter if you create the world's greatest painting and spend thousands of hours on it. If no one's going to buy it, you're never going to get to the next step. He always knew that.
So our first show was a sellout. From then on, I didn't have to call anybody. If there was a Kincaid show, there were people just swarming into the gallery, and in an hour's time, everything was sold. Of course, Tom would be there. He believes in himself, and he's vibrant, and he makes people feel good. They want his painting.
Family, first and foremost, means the wife and children who play such a vital role in Kincaid's life, as in his art. Family also means the playful sense of humor Kincaid honed as a child, and now displays in paintings that often hide multiple initials and birth dates of his loved ones, hearts, holiday dates, Christmas wreaths, and other joyous motifs. And above all, family means faith. In the same year that he married Nanette, Thomas Kincaid made a commitment to putting God at the center of his life, turning life and career over to his direction.
Well, I was raised in a Christian home, and my mother was a woman of prayer. My parents were divorced when I was about 5 years old, and I never had a role model in my home of a dad, of a father that was a loving father image. I didn't see a marriage in operation. My mother never remarried, and yet she did one thing that touched her kids' lives forever. She kept us in prayer, and she prayed for her kids every day, and her whole family is serving the Lord today. But during the course of growing up in a Christian home, I think I went through the usual phase of doubt and frustration that probably all kids do. And that is the greatest blessing a child can go through, is a period of doubt. Because when they come back to the Lord, it is so strong and it's theirs. They have it in their heart from then on. About age 20, I just decided that I need God. I just needed Him more than I needed my next breath of air. And when I reached that point in my life, I always say, when I got saved, my art got saved. And that was the point at which God's light began to infuse my paintings. I was always drawn to painting effects of light from a visual sense. But when I got saved, God became my art agent, if I could coin a term. He began to open doors for me that were doors I should go through, and He began to close doors that were doors I shouldn't go through. And He made the difference between the doors real obvious so that I could see my way every day. And He began to do something I didn't expect, which was to put His light in the paintings. And now when I think of my paintings and I think of the light in the paintings, I don't think of it only in visual terms or emotional terms, but I think of it spiritually as a way to get God's light into people's homes and into their lives. Matthew 5:16 tells us to let our light shine before men, that they see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And if there is anything good in these paintings, my prayer is that they will glorify our Father in heaven.
He doesn't see himself as super spiritual. He's a Christian man that is still growing in faith like so many others. When I think of Tom, I can't help but think of Nanette, because Nanette is stability and strength of character. And together they make a tremendous couple. And I believe that much of Tom's success and much of what he is the result of a wonderful wife who's there with him, supporting him, and loving him.
Our family had just moved back to Placerville, and actually it was a moving day, and our moving van was out front, and we were unloading all the furniture. And Tom rode down Fairview Drive, our street, on his bike. He was the newspaper boy for our neighborhood. And, I saw Tom. And it was, and actually, and he saw me. It was really just a connection there. And a couple days later, it's a funny story, but he came by to solicit the newspaper at our house, and the neighbor girl and I had just met, and we were going to be going swimming. So I had ran in, put on my bikini, and was getting ready to come out to meet her to go to the pool. And Tom came up to the door and knocked on the door. And so when I opened it, I assumed it was going to be her, so I gave it the ta-da this way. And, I screamed and Tom laughed, and so that kind of like was the kickoff for our relationship.
Nanette completes Tom and centers him without a doubt. Her ability to stand by him through the tough times, and nothing happened easily. With people perceive, well, Tom's a great artist and it just all happened overnight. No, there were times when Tom was painting and following this career, and Nanette was working night shift as a nurse in order to support that process, to keep it going, to basically provide the economic support needed to it. Nanette shared Tom's vision from the day one and continued to share that vision throughout the success, but more importantly, when it wasn't successful, when Tom absolutely knew he was going to be an artist, where everyone else might be saying, hey, can you get your husband to get a normal job? I mean, he might be able to drive a truck and get $20 an hour or something like that. Nanette would have none of it. So she absolutely complimented him in his vision and centered him in terms of his life.
She is absolutely perfect. She's perfect for him. She supported him in the beginning when he was just struggling, and she worked as a nurse while he stayed home and painted. He was determined to make a go of it because he loved her, and she'd come home and help him stretch canvas, anything she could do to help, anything.
She helped him fully appreciate the importance of home in that regard, because Nanette became home for Tom, and sort of the vision of their life together became his ideal for what it would be to be a family and have children and remain bonded as a man and wife and what have you. So it probably really crystallized that vision of family for him more than anything, having Nanette there for him, even in his mind early on when they weren't married. He nonetheless presumed he would eventually be married to Nanette. That was going to be family. That was going to be home. That was going to be his life.
My life as an artist is so parallel to my life as a family man. In fact, it's been so fascinating and almost amusing to me that I've become, in a way, a bit of a spokesman for family, home, children, marriage, the joy of marriage. I mean, I married my childhood sweetheart, Nanette, and I tributize her in every painting. So I began talking about how fun it was to be married to my best friend. And I found people just resonating with this. There's so many voices that are telling us the opposite. And we see, be it political leaders or sports figures whose marriages fall apart, whose marriages are meaningless. And yet I honor my wife and love my wife. Same with my children. I believe children are a blessing. I've said this phrase 100 times. Children are not a burden. They're a blessing. They're not something that we have to escape from. And 2 weeks after they're born, we find a way to farm them out to other people. They're meant to be a blessing. They're the greatest adventure God gives us. What a marvelous thing to shape eternity through our children. Because children are the only thing you can create that are eternal. They are eternal beings. God creates them, and He gives you a chance to shape their lives and touch the future.
As newlyweds, the Kincaids agreed that the Hollywood fast track was not the direction they wanted their fledgling family to take. The couple returned to Placerville, seeking the bedrock American virtues, centered on family and faith, that they believed could best be nurtured in a small-town environment. At the same time, Kincaid moved his art back to the landscape and narrative subjects that were dearest to his heart.
They were young, very much in love, very cute couple. And probably my favorite memory of Nanette was I stopped by the studio one night to drop some paintings off or something, and she was out mowing the lawn with Merritt strapped her to her back in a backpack. Tom was down painting, and she's out there mowing the lawn like crazy. They did a lot together. You almost always saw them together. They were very good, homey people. Sometimes they would come by in the afternoon, and one day Nanette grabbed a broom and started sweeping out the warehouse while Tom and I were unpacking some boxes or something. So they were very, very down to earth, good people.
Well, Tom and I have always been a team throughout the whole process of the evolving vision and company. It's it's very exciting how the Lord's been faithful at each phase of the company. Originally, the faith was just for the business becoming established at all.
His original artwork, even before he went into the publishing business, was well received. And so they were like the rest of us. They were living in Placerville, doing their own yard work, driving, a 5-year-old car. But, no, I think they were always very comfortable with what they had. It wasn't like they were desperately seeking some goal that this was going to attain for them. They were very content with what they were doing, even then, even in Placerville.
One of the things that I enjoy when I see Tom and Nanette and the children together is they're a real family. They're not a perfect family, but they're a real family. And they work together and they labor together. And there's that servant heart, there's that serving each other. And I think we can take a lesson from that we don't have to be perfect to have harmony in the home.
When we've been married just a few years, we had a desire to go to Europe, to be able to paint in England and in France, to plein air paint throughout Europe. And we had an opportunity to do this using a mobile home from a friend by swapping a painting and without any real finances. And we left just having delivered probably 12 paintings to a gallery that we were showing at the time. And by faith, assuming that when we came back, they would have all sold and then we'd have the money that we needed to continue. And after 5 weeks, we returned and nothing had sold.
Through the whole thing, he's never wavered. I mean, most of us, I know myself, in your dark moments, you think, oh God, what am I doing? And gee, maybe I'm going down the wrong path. Maybe I should be thinking about something else. Maybe you question yourself. You start, it's human nature. You doubt it, whatever. Tom, he just doesn't do that. He is completely wired into that idea of becoming one of America's greatest painters.
Tom believes in himself more than anyone I've ever known. He truly knew and believed. And I think that is sort of a source of inspiration for me and a lot of other people, that yes, it is doable. And I do think that Tom has probably changed a lot of people's lives for the better, just because he gave them the ability to say, there are good things out there.
At that time, our savings, our life savings, which I think it was about $5,000 that it took to produce a print, and rolled the dice, decided to go ahead and make a print of one of Tom's Alaskan scenes, which was Dawson of the Yukon.
I got a call from a printer that he was having a problem with the painting that needed to be reshot, and I believe it was Dawson. It was like a slice of life. There was people in the street, and there was, it was kind of a bird's eye view of a town, which is something that I wasn't seeing in other people's paintings, because they were sort of static, and there was life to his painting.
Neither of us had any real business background. My background in nursing and Tom and his art, he was the visionary and I was the implementer.
Sometimes we would ship enough posters, you'd look down, the hallway would be nothing but maybe 25 or 30 cylinders that we had rolled and packaged and processed the orders, and then Nanette would throw them in the back of the car and haul them down to the post office and ship them out. It was a very small operation in the beginning.
Tom was producing his own prints, having them done, sitting out at a card table in front of one of our local supermarkets here in town, selling those prints on his own for $25 a piece.
It took us, at least 6 months to sell 200 prints. And I bought 30 of them to keep it going. And, but then after the first 200, somehow that's 200 people who had seen the print and liked it. And they passed the word around. And then the rest, when he printed 1,000, those went pretty fast at $35. We raised the price a whole $10 because they were selling supplies. Then we sold out, and people were desperate to get more. And he wasn't going to print anymore. And so it just went from there. That was such a success in the end that he just kept going.
And he actually donated the originals to the library, which hangs in the library to this day. A very, very large piece, something like 3 foot by 4 foot, and it would probably, if I had to put a value on it, I would say it'd be worth $500,000 today. It wasn't worth perhaps that much at the time, but so he's been very, very generous to the not just the town of Placerville, but the county of El Dorado and surrounding areas.
The annual Placerville project has been going on now almost 10 years, and every year it benefits a different charity. Every year the money stays right in Placerville, and Tom does it out of the goodness of his heart. He is still giving back to the town that he grew up in, that he thinks of as his hometown. I know he still thinks of Placerville as home, and he hasn't lived there, and he probably will never move back to Placerville, but that's where he grew up. And his English teacher is still there at the high school, and you can go into the county library and see one of his early works. That's where he thinks of as, this was where I grew up, this is my home.
But if anybody would stop and examine the amount of money that he has donated to at least a dozen or probably more institutions in Placerville and in El Dorado County, it has been something terrific.
Tom is a rarity. He's a very enterprising artist. He understands how his artwork can help not only charitable groups but communities at large, and has expanded that well outside this local area.
A lot of people will sit back and say that Tom's artwork is wonderfully technically masterful in its approach, whether it's his studio work or his plein air work or some of the sketch work, wonderfully executed. But we really believe, firmly, strongly believe, that Tom will be remembered more for his humanitarian efforts than he will as an artist.
The big insight is simply this: what we do for others makes us happier than what we do for ourselves. Now, that sounds like the reverse of what our thinking is sometimes, because we think, well, to be happy, I better go start doing things for myself. But in fact, having that heart of a servant is the greatest form of joy there is.
Tom has become an inspiration for not only young aspiring artists, but he's become an inspiration to other young men and women who see Tom as setting a standard that's higher than what we've been accustomed to. And so they want to aspire to accomplish things in their respective fields. So he's not only an inspiration for those who love art, he's an inspiration for those who love life.
For Thomas Kincaid, as for most artists we come to care about, talent is only chapter 1. Beyond the question of facility are the issues of quality, of values, of wisdom, if you will. That is particularly true of an artist like Kincaid, noted for his generosity of spirit, who shares his experiences, his enthusiasms, his humor, his beliefs, his faith in his art.
He's going to continue to paint throughout his life. If his work is at this level now, I can't begin to imagine where it's going to be in the future.
He's a young man. He really hasn't reached his peak. When you consider that 40 to 60 is pretty well the area he's just coming into his prime. I know it's hard to imagine, but he will keep improving.
Tom does believe, truly in his heart, that his work can touch everyone's life. He believes that it can enrich their life. I think he's realistic. He doesn't expect that people's whole lives are going to change because they have a Kincaid painting on their living room wall. But I think he believes that he can be a part, even if it's a very small part, of that world.
I've spent my entire life trying to present hope to people through my paintings. I've tried to impart a message of light, to give to others this sense that the world is not all darkness and ugliness. And a painting can do that in a very dramatic way because it goes into someone's home and it's a reminder continuously of a message. It is a little glimpse into a different world. No matter what we face in our life that might be a struggle, might be a challenge, I believe my paintings have been a tool to remind people in the midst of their struggle that there is beauty in the world, there is hope, that God loves them, that He cares for each of us, that it's not all darkness, it is light.
The idealism of the paintings helps instill that kind of hope in people's heart that things can be better, and that they can have that for themselves, that these are things that are attainable in their own lives through choices and an attitude.
Having someone like Thomas Kincaid that can really chronicle our generation and communicate these important messages about people and about families, about children, about nature, about faith, about traditions, to be able to communicate that for years and years to come is an incredible honor that Tom is going to have.
That world that he grew up in, and being a boy in that world, he still has that boy in him, and still that belief that things can be better for America. And I believe that comes out of that culture that he came out of, and he wants the American people to realize that they can live that kind of reality, no matter if they're in a big city or a small town, they can still have it in their heart.
I'm really aware that for many people there is much darkness in their life. The darkness of ignorance, the darkness of poverty, the darkness of even self-destructive attitudes, feelings that are in the heart oftentimes of people that they don't care anymore. They abandon any hope for a future, and they destroy their lives. You cannot believe how wonderful it is to think that in the midst of that darkness we can light a little candle. If I spent my time cursing the darkness, it would be fruitless. We could sit around and say poverty is a horrible thing and curse all these social evils that we see and rant and rave about them, but that would do little good. Instead of cursing the darkness, let's just light a candle.
Over there, it's a task manager. It's a project manager. It's Asana, your work manager. Bring together everything your team needs to get work done in one place. Visit asana.com to try for free.